welcome everyone. And thank you for joining us today. My name is Scott Shay. I am the founder and board president of Chai Mitzvah. I'm also, by the way, executive producer of today's topic, which is the film Guns and Moses, on a really audacious approach toward anti-Semitism and toward introducing Chabad and Orthodox Judaism to a wider audience. Chai Mitzvah is a national organization now celebrating its 17th year. We're looking forward to our own Chai next year. We are the sponsor of the Scholars Circle, and our main focus has been as a Jewish resource center that focuses on building community through Jewish engagement and educational programs. The Scholars Circle program was inspired by my latest book, Conspiracy U, a case study, which unpacks anti-Zionist conspiracy theories from the right and the left of the political spectrum. Now, just before I introduce today's Scholar Circle, I want just to note to everybody, and particularly those in New York and those who hopefully receive this later, that we have a very important election coming up. Anti-Zionism is definitely on the ballot, and I encourage everyone to vote. Don't kvetch, vote. And anybody you know, if you're not a New Yorker, anybody you know who's thinking of just sitting this one out or who doesn't usually vote, call them, drive them to the polls, treat them to an Uber. But this is really anti-Zionism on the ballot in New York City. So with that, I'd like to quickly pivot and talk about today's seminar, which is titled Inside Guns and Moses. And this is an exclusive interview with the director, co-author, producer, and filmmaker, my pal, Sal Litvak. And along with Guns and Moses, Sal is known as well as directing and conceiving of Saving Lincoln, which is based on the true story of Abraham Lincoln and his closest friend and bodyguard, Ward Hill Lamon. This indie feature really was a pioneering film in that it used a new visual style called cinecollage, which places the actors within Civil War photographs. It's really a treat for the eye to see. And the film's Gettysburg Address scene has actually been incorporated into standard American history textbooks used by students across the country while we're still actually teaching history in this country. Sal wrote all of these films with his wife, Nina, and produced them under his banner, Pictures from the Fringe. Sal and Nina share Jewish wisdom, humor, and history with over 1 million followers as the accidental Talmudist. He teaches impressively a daily Talmud class, even during the filming of Guns and Moses, to a diverse audience of thousands of people around the world. This project also arose, and we're going to talk about a little bit, of his faith journey to becoming an Orthodox Jew. He is also, I can tell you, apparently a great golfer. I'm not, so I can't really attest. This is all from hearsay from other people I met in Los Angeles. But he also coached the gold medal winning USA Masters golf team at the 2022 Olympics. We encourage questions during the interview. I'm going to speak, we'll have an interview first, and then as is our normal organization, we're going to then take questions which you can put into the chat, or actually the Q&A button, and then we'll get to some of those at the end. So without further ado, I want to say welcome, Sal, to the Scholar Circle.
Great to be with you, Scott. Thank you for that intro. I can't believe you're talking about me, but I will make one correction. I coached the U.S. Masters team at the Maccabiah Games.
Oh, at the
Jewish Olympics.
Jewish Olympics. Well, you know, the way to become a great Jewish athlete is to play in Jewish leagues.
There you go. There you go. a little
So
bit of a difference between
a
the
little
Olympics
bit,
and the
yes.
Maccabi Games, but it's something that I really encourage everybody to get involved with. Wonderful organization. I went for the first time actually 35 years ago as a rower, and that was my first trip to Israel. So the first time I went to Israel was for the Maccabi Games, and had a great experience. And anybody who's watching us today and who hasn't been to Israel and has an opinion about Israel, you got to go to Israel. And if you haven't been in 10 or 20 years, you got to go to Israel because it keeps changing and it's such a wonderful place and it's always like coming home.
So I'd like to actually start there, Sal. You did not grow up as a Talmudic scholar, as an Orthodox Jew. You really began your journey, as they say, in a certain kind of way, besheret, buying a Talmud. So what drove a primarily secular Jew to go in and to buy a set of Talmuds? And how did you accidentally become a Talmudist?
Right. So the story has to start a little bit further back than that. It's really when I reconnected with Judaism. I mean, I went to Hebrew school when I was a kid, 3 days a week, a big conservative synagogue in New City, New York, which is in Rockland County. And then I had my bar mitzvah, and I was done. I was never very inspired. It seemed like people were just doing it because they were forced to. It was a chore. It wasn't inspiring to me. It wasn't spiritual for me. And it's really tragic. And I think there are a lot of Jews that end up with this kind of feeling about Judaism because they've been exposed, to diluted, watered down, uninspiring Judaism. It's Nina and I like to joke that you've never tried sushi, and so then you take 3-day-old sushi from a supermarket, and you say, "Oh, sushi sucks," but you didn't have sushi. You don't know what sushi is, and so the really sad thing about it is I was always interested in God. I was kind of a science guy, and it never made sense to me that a universe full of stuff would burst into being for no reason. It must have been wanted. That would be a creator. And I was always fascinated by the creator and figured he would be, he would like that the creatures would be interested in the creator. And I just didn't know, I just didn't think that Judaism was about that, was about that spiritual relationship with the creator. And, thank God I didn't go looking for it in other religions, but I went to a lot of other practices. So meditation, martial arts, drumming, Grateful Dead shows, all kinds of ways and manners that I was looking for that access to the higher world. And when it all changed for me was as a young adult. My grandmother passed away, and I was present at her passing. And to set that up a little bit, she was an incredible lady, super funny, Hungarian, and she carried my mother as an infant through a concentration camp. Absolute miracle story. My mom was born in Kartsag, Hungary in 1944. She never met her father. He was taken away while my grandmother was still pregnant. He perished at Dachau. But my grandmother kept my mother alive. And after the war, they were in Soviet Hungary, which was better than the Nazis, but not so much. And they finally escaped Hungary in 1956 and ended up in Chile, where my father's family had been after fleeing the pogroms of Ukraine around 1905. And when a communist president was elected in Chile, the Hungarian side of the family said, "Yeah, we've seen this before." And that's how we ended up in America. My grandmother always lived with us. She was very happy for all the people who started their families again and remarried after the Holocaust. But for her, one of these great love stories, there was only her husband. And so something we knew about her, that she was waiting to be reunited with him in the next world. And when she passed away in 1997, I was present. And I'm not a person who has visions and sees things, but I will tell you that day I saw her soul reunite with my grandfather, who I recognized from photographs. was an incredibly powerful shared death experience. And when I came back to LA, where I was living and struggling to get a foothold in the movie business, uh, I wanted to honor her in some way, and so I went back to a synagogue, like the kind of synagogue I'd grown up in. But luckily, the rabbi that day was a very inspiring and gifted speaker. And I said, this thing I've been looking for in all these other practices, maybe I should try my own backyard. And that's when I reconnected with Judaism, with Torah, with learning, and for the next 8 years was taking classes with all kinds of great rabbis. And every rabbi would always mention the Talmud. So clearly, this repository of the oral tradition that stretches all the way back to Mount Sinai must be full of wisdom, and I want to access that wisdom. But I didn't go to yeshiva. I didn't really know what the Talmud is, other than some quotes that I heard from it. And so every time I would go to the mitzvah store, this Judaica and bookshop, which at that time was on Pico Boulevard here in LA, and I would see the Art Scroll Talmud. I'd be like, okay, there's the Talmud. Now, for people in the audience who are old enough to remember Encyclopedia Britannica, 23 volumes, The Wisdom of Humanity. So the Art Scroll Talmud is 73 volumes, each the same size as Britannica volumes. So the Wisdom of the Jews, 73 volumes. And it's just so vast that I was like, well, I didn't go to yeshiva. I'm not a rabbi. I don't even know if I'm allowed to read that, let alone where to begin. I guess it's not for me. Walk away. And over the ensuing years, between 97 and 2005, that probably happened a dozen times. And I would always walk away intimidated. And then one time I was in that store again, and I went through that same thought process. I started to walk away, and then something stopped me. And I said, this is ridiculous. They're just books. I was an English major at a fine university. I went to law school and film school. My wife and I are writers, and we're real bibliophiles. We're book people. Our house is full of books. There must be a book one of the Talmud. I'll just get that, see what it's like. And found it, took it to the counter. The kid at the register says, "Oh, you're doing Daf Yomi." So I said, "What's Daf Yomi?" And he went like this. His glasses down to the tip of his nose, looking at me as if to say, "Are you kidding?" And I thought, wow, Daf Yomi must be a code. If you don't know the code, you're not allowed to read these books. Now he's got to get rid of me without embarrassing me. It's so awkward. And he said, Daf Yomi means page of the day in Hebrew, or page a day. And it's a program where people around the world read the entire Talmud, one page a day, on the same schedule. And if you do that, it takes 7.5 years to read the Talmud. And that day, as he was speaking to me, when he said, today is day one. So I happened to buy book one of the Talmud on day one of a 7.5 year cycle. And when God wants you to get a message, he can be very clear, very specific, even without the use of words. And so I got the message. I said, okay, I'm doing Daf Yomi. And a lot of people start Daf Yomi and they have a black hat and a long beard, and they don't finish because it's such a big commitment. It's an hour a day, every day for 7.5 years. But I really felt like God put the book in my hand, so I stayed with it. And as I was coming to the end of that cycle in 2012, I called my friend David Suisse, as the publisher of the Jewish Journal here in LA, who had become a big fan of our first film, When Do We Eat? I told him this story. I said, if I wrote that up, would you publish it? And he said, Sal, that's a cover story for the Jewish Journal, but don't you have more to say than fits in one article? I said, I guess so. He said, write a column for us. So it came to be known as the Accidental Talmudist. And to promote the column, we started a Facebook page called Accidental Talmudist. And we learned a little bit about Facebook marketing for When Do We Eat and our second film, Saving Lincoln. And we're communicators. And so, we were able to communicate well, and completely unexpected. I never would have imagined that my life would take this turn. The platform grew and grew and grew and grew fast. And Nina and I have always shared what we find beautiful and inspiring and uplifting in Judaism, in Torah. in the oral tradition. And if we have a secret sauce, it's that we make it accessible to everybody without dumbing it down. We really respect our audience. It's always been a very diverse audience. We have Orthodox Jews, Reform Jews, conservative Jews, Reconstructionist Jews. We have Christians, we have Muslims, we have atheists. There really is something in an unbroken wisdom tradition that stretches back 3,500 years that can speak to everybody. And it is from God, and that's why it has remained relevant all this time, and maybe has never been more relevant than it is right now. So that's a little bit of background on AT.
I want to shift with the relevancy to talking about Guns N' Moses. I mean, we've lived through recent days of, or recent, not days, recent years of Pittsburgh, Poway, Jersey City, Muncie, Colleyville, and unfortunately, that list goes on. I just picked a few names of places where Jews have been attacked with gun bearing anti-Semites, and in all of those above cases have been Jews have been, except for Colleyville, thankfully, I believe Jews have been murdered.
Yeah.
And it was one of the first things I learned in talking to you about this film was that it was in the aftermath of the Poway attack that you started thinking about Guns N' Moses. Can you tell me a little bit about how you and Nina became inspired to actually do a movie? Making a movie, you're a movie maker, and I just have sort of watched from the sidelines, and it's a massive endeavor. You have to really want to make a movie to make a movie, particularly an indie movie if you don't have a big studio behind you. So tell us about how Poway affected you and caused you to write what became Guns N' Moses, along with Nina.
Yeah, so around 2018, especially 2019, we said it's time for us to make another movie. It had been a few years while we were building the Accidental Talmudist platform. And so we knew we were going to make a Jewish movie because that's who we are, it's what we're interested in, and we bring an audience. And then I said, we made a historical drama, we made a comedy. I want to make a thriller. I love thrillers. It's my favorite genre. Nina has come to enjoy them probably as much as I do. And we were watching a thriller a day in our living room. We set up, just a portable screen and a projector, and just watched them, fair size in our living room. All the greats: Hitchcock, De Palma, Clouseau, Polanski. We worked our way through every list of the top 50, the top 100, the top 20 thrillers of all time. And we really, aimed to make a film that could take its place on any one of those lists. That's what we were going for. And the fact that it would be Jewish is because, those are the characters that we would know, and we could be very specific and accurate and bring fresh characters. It wasn't going to be about Cary Grant on a train across the country. It was going to be about somebody from our world. And as we were trying to figure out what the story would be, the Poway shooting happened on the 8th day of Passover in 2019. I drove down the next day. I attended the funeral of Lori Gilbert Kay, who was murdered that day by a young white nationalist shooter. I held the bandaged hands of Rabbi Goldstein, who courageously ran at the shooter and tried to tell him, stop, what are you doing? And the guy shot off the rabbi's fingers, and then the gun jammed, and then he ran out of there. And I interviewed Rabbi Goldstein for Accidental Talmudist, and then watched him become a national figure in the ensuing days, calling for mitzvahs, calling for something good and righteous to come out of that terrible darkness. And we found that very inspiring. And Guns N' Moses is not the story of the Poway shooting, but you could see very much that kind of Rabbi Mo's sweetness, I mean, I have a lot of Chabad rabbis who are close friends of mine. Uh, how and Rabbi Mo in the movie is a Chabad rabbi, and how one kind of Chabad rabbi, how one kind of rabbi would react to an attack on his community. Another element that was very important in the genesis of this movie is that as a Frum Yid, right, as an Orthodox Jew, I walk around in a kippah. When I go to shul on Shabbos, I'm wearing a black suit and a black fedora, and we're the visible Jews. You know, there are a lot of Jews, and we have Judar, right? We can tell each other who each other are just at a glance, perhaps. But when you're an Orthodox Jew walking around, you're aware that even the non-Jews know you're a Jew. And the threat levels have been rising for years. You know, it's exploded since October 7th, but we've been very conscious of it for quite a while. And I did not grow up around guns. I didn't know from firearms, but a bunch of my friends were joining this organization, Maganam, meaning Shield of the Nation, founded by Chabad Rabbi Yossi Elfert here in Los Angeles, where we get trained extensively, more training and more difficult qualifications than FBI agents have to pass. And we get licensed, and initially for exposed carry and wearing a uniform. We're all volunteers, but we wear the uniform of a security guard with insignia, and carry a gun in synagogue, and carry a gun at Jewish events. Eventually, most of us got concealed carry permits, but we continue to guard our communities. And again, nothing I ever imagined I'd be doing. I did not grow up around guns. I didn't know from guns. And it's very, very difficult to shoot straight. That's not an easy thing. So in movies, you know, when somebody needs to learn how to shoot, and it's a 20-second montage with, you know, 5 tin cans on a wood rail fence, and he misses the first one, and then he hits them, and then he's a dead shot. That's not the real world. In the real world, it's very difficult to shoot, and to shoot under pressure when you're in danger, when you have to save life, that much harder. And it's only going to be possible if you have muscle memory, tremendous amounts of repetitions and training. And I was engaged in that kind of training. And so in the movie, when Rabbi Mo, you know, is finally forced reluctantly to take up a gun to defend his community, he goes through that training on screen. And, you know, something I've seen in my travels with the movie, screenings all over the country, the firearms community is beside itself. Like, thank you. Wow, finally, a Hollywood movie that actually shows what it takes and how difficult it is and what the steps are of learning how to use a firearm. So these are the elements that were in the air as we were conceiving the movie.
So there's been, and since I've attended some screenings in person and had questions, people who have come up to me knew I was involved with the movie. It's engendered a lot of conversations within the Jewish community about defending the Jewish community, and indeed as well in the UK, where they just recently, sadly, on Yom Kippur,
in Manchester,
with the Manchester murder. And what kind of conversations initially did you think this would engender, and what conversations have you found it has engendered that are different than what you thought before?
You know, it's funny, like, remember where we're coming from was to make a great thriller. And for us, it's all about the hero's journey, and what Rabbi Mo goes through, what his community is up against, and just really pulling from our own experience to make that very specific and accurate and realistic, and something that you haven't seen on screen before. I mean, there's many Jews on the movie screen, and they're either dead Jews from the Holocaust or shticky Jews, you know, in the comedies, and you just never see realistic portrayals of Torah Jews, of Orthodox Jews, of Chabad rabbi. You just never see that. Now, we knew that making that depiction on screen should spark some kind of conversations, and especially showing a rabbi with a gun, you know, Jews who are getting armed to protect themselves. that would spark some kind of conversations. Um, and it's, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that Jews in America, the majority of Jews are not Orthodox. They tend to be politically liberal. And their views on gun control are, they're not so comfortable with guns. Um, I think that since October 7th, there's been some real movement in those kinds of attitudes. Not necessarily people's politics are changing, although some are, but when you're truly in danger, we have a very well-honed survival instinct.
Yep.
That we've evolved to have that survival instinct with thousands of years of persecution. And it doesn't matter what your politics are. When there's really, when you're not paranoid, when in fact people are coming to kill you, you have to take action. And so a lot of people are now interested in Jewish security. And so at these screenings, a lot of these screenings were Jewish film festivals. We're invited to pretty much every Jewish film festival, and I attended a lot of them. And there's always sort of like one person who wants to make a statement about that this is the wrong kind of message. And I generally don't even have to answer that person because people in the audience get very impatient with somebody who wants to, make a speech of that sort after a movie like this. Because, Rabbi Mo, he's not Rambo. We're not glorifying violence at all. There's no gore, by the way, in the movie. I mean, there's action. There is some violent action, but it's not gore. And what's being portrayed is something that is actually happening in the real world. As you said, it happened at Poway, it happened at Manchester. And so now, it used to be, let me tell you, in America, we had the luxury that most of our synagogues did not have an armed guard standing in front. In the rest of the world, they did not have that luxury. Obviously not in Israel, but in Chile, 10 years ago, I was like, oh, wow, you have an armed guard, with a long gun standing in front of the Jewish schools, standing in front of the synagogues. And that's the way it's been in most countries around the world because the danger to Jews is real. And thank God, we grew up in this little piece of paradise, where we weren't so concerned about Jewish safety. And I remember my mom and my grandma, who went through the Holocaust, would always say, don't think it can't happen in America. And I would think, I know why you're saying that. You passed through it. It's important that you say that. But come on, not in America. Now, I'm not saying that we're in 1930s Germany right now. We're not. But the dangers that we're seeing, it's unlike anything that we've experienced, at least in my lifetime. I think in any of our lifetimes. The 80-year pause since the Holocaust is in some sense over. And we have to take Jewish security very, very seriously. We have to be vigilant. No, it's not for everybody to get a gun. Not everybody should get a gun. And if you're thinking about getting a gun to defend your home and you're just going to buy it, put it in a drawer, you know what? Maybe it's better you don't get it. Because if you own a firearm, you need to train. You need to take classes. You need to take lessons. You need to use it regularly so that you know what you're doing and you're not a danger to yourself and others. Because it's very difficult and it is dangerous. But if you're a person who likes to learn how to do something new and can take it seriously, then it's very important that you do it because our community is threatened. It's real. There are a lot of people out there who hate us. And politically, it's a horseshoe effect. Far right, far left.
And
that's the one thing they can agree on.
I mean, you learned, and it's not something, again, that's just on the right. Mm-hmm. Look, the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, had a gun. And she is, extraordinarily on the, progressive. There are lots of people who I've had conversations with who are on all parts of the spectrum who are taking the threat to the Jewish, to American Jewry very seriously. And they are taking training. Definitely taking training. And that's really the only way to do it is with training because a gun can be a very dangerous thing, more
Yeah.
dangerous. I think you're right to say, without training, it can be far more dangerous to have a gun than not to have a gun.
Yeah.
But rabbis are now grappling with congregants in New York and other places who are talking about whether or not they should have concealed weapons inside the synagogue, which is something that they never thought about before.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Yeah.
a real it's a real paradigm. It's a real paradigm shift. So
Yeah. And one simple thing I'll just say on this subject, because I'm on my soapbox for a moment. This is something for yourself and especially for your kids. Uh, don't walk down the street with your nose in a phone. Just don't do that. Okay, like then you are blind and vulnerable in a way that is so unnecessary and so dangerous. All of us have to be, looking around as we walk around. You don't have to be paranoid, but you have to have situational awareness at all times.
I think that's a really good point to make. I have to tell you that I was walking to synagogue between on a Shabbat morning, wearing my kippah, minding my own, beeswax, and between on 84th, between first and second, somebody started coming up and screaming at me, and
Really?
I didn't have a phone. It was Shabbat. I didn't have anything, but it was sort of out of the blue. I wasn't looking around. I was in my own, a little bit in my own world. Um, and really started screaming things. It's not. I'm not going to repeat anything, but it really surprised me dramatically and has changed my view towards situational awareness because the person could have had a knife, he could have had a gun, um, and any second in that situation counts. And
Yeah.
it was a simple act of wearing a kippah, nothing more, nothing more. So I'd like to shift a little bit, to inside the beltway, as it were, of the movie business, because you probably have made one of the most highly rated movies with the popcorn meter on Rotten Tomatoes. It's in the 90s. I don't check it daily, but I think it was 93, 94, which is really good. On the other hand, some of the so-called pundits, critics, have taken a special put a special chip on their shoulder because perhaps it's a Jewish movie depicting Orthodox Jews. I want to get your feeling on it, but I've read a lot of the reviews. As a matter of fact, I conveyed to you that I was at a screening with the Haaretz writer who was busily trying to find someone to say something negative about the movie. She was, accosting people as they left. And finally, I introduced myself to her as an executive producer. And boy, she was ready to do a proctoscope. So without anesthesia. Uh, and on the end, you've had, some great reviews from a lot of folks, but on a certain spectrum, for example, the New York Times, spoiler alert, I'm not giving away too much here. The New York Times had a negative review. They couldn't even understand the movie, it seems. So I'm wondering how how you as a filmmaker took to the reviews, how you deal with them. Were you surprised by anything? Um, and maybe you can talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when you talk about this post October 7th climate and how it has affected everything about our movie, getting the movie to the audience, that was one of the big ones. So we've had, first of all, we punched way above our weight in terms of interest in the movie. And so if you Google Guns and Moses, there's 7 or 8 pages, 10 links on each page of press about the movie. A lot of ink has been written about the movie. So a movie like that, and with our cast, I mean, Christopher Lloyd is legendary actor, Dermot Mulroney, Neil McDonough, Mark Feuerstein, such a familiar face, Jake Busey. theatrical release, hundreds of theaters. So you would expect hundreds of reviews, easily. It's certainly 100, 150, even 200 reviews. We have 11 on Rotten Tomatoes. That's a crazy number. That does not make sense. When you said, I don't think the New York Times reviewed the movie. Maybe
somewhere in there online, actually.
Oh, I haven't even seen that.
Yeah.
So maybe they were forced. So that's new. They were forced to do that.
They picked up, but it's there someplace.
Okay, but in terms of a real review, like an actual, watch the movie and give an opinion at length, they didn't. LA Times didn't. So many outlets didn't. What's fascinating is they did watch the movie. Now, I don't think that critics bother to watch a movie and then not review it. That's not their work. That's not what they do. So what that means, and we know they watched it because we send out screeners that give us that information. So what that means is that somebody at that probably was a good review, and then somebody at that organization stopped it. And anti-Semitism is real. This is not paranoid. This is not whining. There are Jew haters out there, and they're very much in the media. Like we see from the coverage of Israel and Jewish issues, how much we're losing, as they say, the PR war. And so it only takes, one or two people in an organization to stop the coverage and just ignore us, to ghost us, and so what should be a multiplier effect of our whole publicity push would be stopped dead if an outlet, a newspaper, a magazine, a TV station just doesn't cover, doesn't review, ignores. And a lot of that, happened to us. That's just a very real effect of what's going on in the war. And of course, it's anti-Semitism because they always say, well, we're not anti-Semites, we're just anti-Zionist. Our movie has nothing to do with Israel. This is about Jews in America having a situation, a mystery, a series of murders in a small town in California. That is not about the situation of the IDF in Israel. But that's just one of the many hurdles that we have had to overcome. Thank God the movie is available now throughout the U.S. People can watch it. We're talking so much about this movie. You can watch it right now. It's on Amazon. It's on Apple. You can rent it or buy it. We encourage you to buy it. It only costs a few dollars more. And then when the rental period ends, you'll still have the movie. You could share it with friends. Watch it whenever you want. And now a lot of people have come to me and said, I saw it in the theater and I saw it again, or I even saw it in the theater twice. Nina and I are the type of creators. We've been on this for years. I mean, we put all our heart and soul into this movie. And there's all kinds of stuff that you don't notice in one viewing. Just like any kind of Torah study, you don't read a paragraph, you don't read a verse, you don't read a chapter once. Every time you see it, you'll see new stuff. So we definitely encourage people to buy the movie for a few dollars extra. But it's so great that now people can see it at home, and the word of mouth, the buzz is fantastic. It's just people are really loving the movie. They're sharing it with their friends. They're reaching out to us. They're telling us how much it means to them. They just haven't seen a movie like it. They haven't seen characters like this. They're inspired. They're gratified. But more than anything, thank God, they're entertained.
Yes.
And so we've done our job.
So the first thing you want to do with the movie is entertain. You had a theme of, of saying the community needs to defend ourselves. Was there anything else you were trying to do with the whole genre of whodunit? You watched a ton of movies. I remember even talking to you pre-production about the number of movies that you and Nina watched that you sort of distilled into building Guns and Moses, or into creating Guns and Moses. Are there any other things when you're talking about I've watched the movie more than a few times at this point, and so I picked up on some of those. But is there anything you sort of, without, again, no spoilers, but some favorite things that you want to point out? People,
one thing is
what they watch.
Yeah, one thing is we're very proud of the centerpiece, the cat and mouse scene, at the Mirror Farm in the Mojave Desert. That was one other element that was there at the time that we were coming up with the idea for the movie. I had noticed this thermal solar energy facility that if you drive from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, you pass it near the Nevada border. It's called Ivanpah. And when you first see it, you're like, what is that? Because it's not this kind of solar energy you normally would think of in your mind, these acres and acres of sort of black photoelectric solar panels. This is based on mirrors that are moving all day long, very slowly, called heliostats, and keeping the light of the sun from hundreds of thousands of these mirrors focused on these towers. They're three 50-story towers, collecting all that heat and using it to heat up a kind of transfer fluid, which they then use to generate electricity. But visually, it's just so arresting and stunning. And I thought that would be an incredible location for a cat and mouse scene, the way that Hitchcock used Mount Rushmore in North by Northwest. And I had the idea to do that kind of a scene at a location like that, or that location, before we even had a movie to put it in. I was looking for a movie that I could put that scene in. And then, of course, so we wrote it in. It became integral to the plot. It's a very important scene. The movie doesn't work without it. And then when it came time to shoot, we went to Ivanpah, billion-dollar facility, and said, yeah, we'd like to shoot our movie here, our independent movie. And they said, no. And we said, well, these are all the reasons why you might want to reconsider. It's important, it's useful, it's good advertising, it's marketing for you, it's visually no. Read our lips. No. And no amount of cajoling worked. So plan A was out. Now, usually we have plan A and God has plan B. That's B for better. And it turned out to be better. Because our drone operator was hunting around on YouTube and he found this other thermal solar energy facility in Mojave that features the same idea of mirrors collecting energy, but a different kind of arrangement where these parabolic trough mirrors that are 30 feet high and 200 yards long, and there's 2,000 of these vast structures. And it was, it's like a James Bond or science fiction. I mean, it's such an incredible location, and no one had ever filmed there, and no one had ever asked. And we came and asked, and they said, "Sure, you could film here." And it helped that I was born in Chile, and Spanish is my first language, and I kind of bonded with the head of the plant, a guy named David Rojas. And so we had been told by the guy who showed us around, one of the managers, that could we break some mirrors because it's going to be a shootout here. It's like, no, you can't break mirrors. But then when I got to know the CEO and spoke in Spanish, I said, by the way, can we break some mirrors? And he's like, yeah, sure, the wind breaks mirrors all the time, you could break some mirrors.
That's wonderful. I want to run through a little bit. We've gotten a few questions and comments.
Great.
And I'm just going to say the first one I think is for me. Can you be a religious Zionist without being a political Zionist, or vice versa? And I think the answer to that is clearly yes. I would say it's a long answer. I'd refer people actually to Conspiracy U, where I talk a bit about, defining Zionism. But just to give you a sense, the least religious group I can think of is Hashomer Hatzair or Habonim, which are both Zionist organizations, sort of one step to the right of Maoism, and they are both very Zionist organizations. Someone's pointing out or asking about the community service, this community security service that's used by many federations and groups through JFNA, Jewish Federations in North America. It says they don't currently endorse community volunteers carrying guns. Do you think that's the right policy?
I think they're being prudent, right? And they don't want yahoos who don't know what they're doing carrying guns and who could be alarmed by the wrong thing and and hurt people that they're trying to save. But as I said earlier, I think with the proper training, then yes, it would be great to have some people carrying in every shul. And so, how do you draw the line? How do you know that you've got proper training? How do you know that you can trust people and that they know who each other is? That's another issue, right? If the people who are in the shul who are carrying don't know each other and can't have a coordinated response, that could also cause trouble. So I think it starts with the synagogue president, the rabbi, the leaders in every shul, and then they have to have honest conversations with the leadership and talk about, okay, well, we need to protect ourselves. How are we going to do that in a sane, methodical, and serious way? And it's not going to be the same answer for every synagogue, certainly. But again, we can't just put our heads in the sand and say the problem will go away or we're going to call the police. Because if there's a shooting at your shul, by the time the police arrive, all the devastation has happened. So it has to be done the right way.
So another proud IDF mom who also saw the movie in San Antonio is asking, is thanking you first of all, and asking about carrying a gun in Israel, particularly. And I can say this: is it legal? The answer is you need to register in Israel too. Post October 7th, I know personally people who have registered to carry guns. But
yeah, it used to be much more difficult, and
yeah,
now
now
they've eased it up.
They have, and it helps if you're an IDF veteran and you've been trained. But carrying a handgun is different than carrying a rifle. It is a lot harder to shoot.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to aim. And then the thing I was going to ask before we sort of move toward the end, and I was waiting for this, but someone actually asked it, is can you tell us one of your favorite jokes from Let My People Laugh? And actually, I'd like to know one of your favorite jokes, just period. And I should say to the group that Sal is now done stand up. And he's lived to tell the tale. There were some who were taking the under on that.
I was scared because I wrote the book "Let My People Laugh," which is a collection of classic Jewish jokes that I curated and rewrote and adapted to the modern ear. And there are many Jewish joke books, and most of them have too many jokes, hundreds and hundreds of jokes. A lot of them are not funny and don't really work in the modern world. This has 163 excellent jokes. And lists at the front of jokes for a wedding toast, jokes for a business lunch, jokes for a golf outing. It's a very useful book, and it's a bestseller on Amazon, thank God. So, I know lots of jokes, but one I often like to tell is the rabbi, the priest, and the imam who are speaking at an interfaith conference on a panel, and they're all asked, "What would you like people to say about you at your funeral?" And the imam says, "Well, at my funeral, I hope they'll say I put the needs of my congregation before my own." And the priest says, "At my funeral, I hope they'll say that I extended my ministry beyond the walls of my church." And the rabbi says, "At my funeral, I hope they'll say, look, he's moving."
There's also a question here, and I actually, having read your book, can think of one, which is if you had any joke about guns, and you actually do have a joke about, I'm going to just tee it up, but a policeman is called to check out the scene of a shooting, and he finds the wife has shot her husband. And
Yeah, this
and the policeman asks, why did you shoot your husband? He said, she said, I told him the floor was wet, and if he walked on it, I'd shoot him. So he calls into the office, he calls into the precinct, and he says, this is the situation, the man's dead, the wife shot him. And the sergeant says, have you arrested the have you arrested the wife? He says, no, the floor's still wet.
Well done, Scott. Well done.
Um, so on that, we're starting to get to our sort of tail end. And I first of all want to say that I've greatly enjoyed this interview. And I'm just a fan of everything you do. People can follow you on Instagram, Facebook, a whole host of different ways. I'm just for one, looking forward to your next project, which I'm sure will come B'Meirava Yameinu.
Oh, man.
But I'd like to end, before we end, I'd like to give you a chance to just talk about anything that we missed that you'd like to leave people with, and have here on the Scholar Circle website for posterity.
I would love to say thank you to you and to everybody who believed in the movie and who's been backing the movie, who worked on the movie. I just shared a clip today on our Instagram at Accidental Talmudist or Salvador Litvak. You can find it, and it's that scene, actually, the cat and mouse scene at the mirror field, an excerpt of it. But just the scene, right? Not cut as a trailer piece, just like an actual straight how it appears in the movie. And I just remember what a tough shoot that was. We were out there for 2 days. The wind was howling. We had a lot of malfunctions on the first day when we got, I think, 30 setups. And on the second day, we got almost 90 setups, which is just unheard of in filmmaking. But we were a well-oiled machine, and we just had to do it. We had to do it. And we had a 20-day shoot, and the movie looks like any Hollywood movie. If Hollywood were making this movie, they would have 3 months to do it. We got it done, and we never needed reshoots. And I think that's a real testament to the cast, to the crew, everybody who just believed in the project and just committed to it and was down for it. And there have been so many people in our initial theatrical release, which was limited. And so there were people who drove for hours and hours so that they could see the movie. And then they wrote to us, it was so worth it. We loved it. We had so much fun. There's just no other movie like it. And now that it's available and you can get it at home, if you haven't watched it, please watch it. And if you have watched it and you enjoy it, the way we are and the way that people that I've talked about, then please join the effort. Be an evangelist for this movie, because there's just nothing like it. And I'll say something that Nina would say if she were here. The stereotyping of Jews by Hollywood, which is run and owned by Jews, right? Everybody talks about it. Hollywood is run by the Jews. Hollywood is run by the Jews. Well, the Jews that run Hollywood are not doing the Jews any favors. And this stereotyping in American films, as I mentioned earlier, either dead Jews in the Holocaust or very shticky Jews. Those are great. There's wonderful Holocaust movies. There's incredibly funny movies. I love Adam Sandler. I love Jerry Seinfeld. I love Larry David. But there's so much more to us. We're an ancient people. We're so nuanced. We're so complex. We bring so many different colors, literally colors, and histories and stories. And there's so much that we have to contribute. And this movie, gives you some Jews on screen that you've never seen before, Jews you can be proud of, strong Jews, good role models, and who are just fascinating people in situations that, you haven't seen. And to see the way they react is just very different than the way, people from another group would react under the same kind of pressure. And if the audience doesn't step up and support a film like this, then there won't be more movies like it. So, send the message, send the signal to Hollywood that we want more movies like this. We want more views of the Jews, more interesting stories, entertaining stories, than the kinds of shticky stereotypes we've seen in the past. And this is your opportunity to do that. I'll say one last thing about that. Rotten Tomatoes, we do have a good score, a very good audience score. It's been dropping a little lately. for the same reason that our IMDb score is quite mediocre. And if you go to IMDb, Guns N' Moses, you'll see that in the ratings, which normally anyone who knows anything about statistics says, when a lot of people are participating in anything, especially giving opinions, there's going to be a bell curve, right? And most are going to be populating in the center somewhere. And, you'll have extremes that hate it or that love it. But most people will be somewhere in the middle. That's not our graph at all. It's an inverse bell curve. And this huge, chunk of people who are giving it 10 and 9, who really love the movie. And then there's this tall tower of ones. Now, you see this movie, if you just look at the trailer, this is not a 1 out of 10 movie. That's nothing but anti-Semitism. They're offended that Jews are strong and Jews have placed ads and Jews are showing, Jews fighting back. And they just want to express their hatred by giving it a 1 out of 10. And that lowers our overall number. And so when people go look for it on Apple or on Amazon, the ones that show the IMDb score, that can turn people off. So I really appreciate people who care about this movie, love this movie, go to IMDb and vote. Go to Rotten Tomatoes and vote. Don't kvetch, vote for Scott's hat.
Definitely.
And while you're at it, vote for a mayoral candidate in New York who is not anti-Jewish, anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic, anti-decent.
Yes. Well, on that note, I'm going to say thank you. It's really been a pleasure. And to everyone who's tuned in, thank you for participating. And we look forward to welcoming you on our next Scholars Circle, which is where we're going to be featuring Dr. Jared Taney. And the topic will be Jewish Studies Under Siege, Academia's Failure to Protect Zionists, which will take place on November 5th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That's a topic, obviously, that's near and dear to my heart. And thank you for attending this session, and we hope to see you sometime soon.